Okay, thanks, Kevin, and thank you, you and Richard and Kit from the BCP for providing us with the opportunity and having a lot of support for SOGI 123 over the course of this year. And thank you all for joining. It's a two-parter, and last week we kind of focused on the why, the how, and some aspects of parent rights as well, and how it relates to SOGI 123. That video is on YouTube right now, so if you didn't get a chance to check it out, that is available. So today we're going to focus on inclusive environments and curriculum, quite a bit of material to go through, opportunity for questions at the end, and I'll just try to whip through the slides here and provide as much insight as possible. For those of you who weren't there last week, I've been a principal for 14 years, elementary school in Delta, and right now I'm the BC SOGI Education Lead with a one-year secondment, and it's a position funded by the Ministry of Education. So I'm supporting 51 districts. They each have a district lead, and then those district leads are training school leads at their school sites. So we have the potential and the reality really by the end of the year of 1,300 volunteers in this network. So these types of presentations are happening throughout the province, led by mostly district leads and then school leads in their schools. And some of you may be familiar with that. I will say that one last thing before we get into the PowerPoint. If your district is not a member of the network, feel free to contact me if you'd like some more information, and we can get the ball rolling. Now, inclusive environments. So how do we build those? And I mean, that's kind of a primary objective for all of us who are administrators and trying to build a welcoming and inclusive school for everyone who enters the building. And I've had so many people say that it's tangible. When you enter a building, as soon as you step into the front office, it's tangible for many people as to whether or not it's welcoming or not. We did something recently at our school. In Delta, we put up one of those stickers from the BCTF. This is a safe place for LGBTQ people. We ended up editing it and became this is a safe place for everyone, but maintaining the rainbow sticker so it's implied that it's a directed message, but really wants to include everyone. And that's just one little thing that we could do to build inclusive environments. Some research to support this. Dr. Elizabeth Saywick is a professor with the School of Nursing at UBC, and she found that having these tangible policies that are fully implemented, SOGI policies, and having inclusive environments, this leads to better student outcomes, and that's local data that's quite tangible for people to consider, and it benefits everybody. So as we're moving forward through this, I just ask you to reflect on a couple of things. What are some of the things that your school does to show that is accepting and welcoming for students and families of all sexual orientations and gender identities? I actually sat down with one of the families at my school that was a same-sex couple and said, what are some things that we could do? I mean, I'm gay myself, but I don't have children. And I wanted to get their perspective on, what could we do to, manage some of the frustrations maybe that you may have, or what are some simple changes that we can make? And I found that very helpful. What are some examples of homophobic or gender policing language that you hear in school? And this is one that I really had to work on because I was a PE teacher for a while, grade 6 teacher, and I often got caught up into that boys and girls, particularly for PE. It was boys on the red line, girls on the black line, or vice versa. And I actually steered away from that way before any of this SOGI education came out, because for me, it limited my options. I quickly discovered as a PE teacher that by constantly reinforcing the difference between boys and girls, I was losing options when it came time to form groups, partnerships. It was like I split the class in half and created this kind of segregation in many of the classes, not all, but the same thing applied in the classroom as well. By constantly reinforcing that boys and girls, you're reinforcing the differences, and there's some obvious differences there. But you're kind of creating some barriers to group work and so on. So some things that started to happen in my practice, and then I've noticed with other teachers, is trying to avoid the boys and girls. And some of the misinformation that's been out there through some opponents of SOGI 123 suggesting we're never going to use boys and girls. Well, the fact is there are lots of children that identify as boys and girls. We're still going to be using those terms. There are also a lot of transgender students who want to identify as a boy or a girl. They've transitioned just for that reason, so they can identify with the gender identity that they choose. And so they still want to be referred to, if they've gone male to female, as a girl. So we're still going to use those terms, but when we're talking to a group, like I used to do PA announcements, and I eliminated that from my PA announcements in terms of hello boys and girls or at assemblies, that type of thing. So a lot of teachers started to use folks or refer to them as a team. So instead of Division 16, it's Team 16, friends. A lot of different options there for you, rather than always reinforcing the gender differences and the gender biases that are there. I know I keep falling into it every once in a while. I'll say guys often. That's my go-to. So I've tried to correct that as well. But you look at some of the examples there of how some of the bias is kind of embedded in just, what seem like casual comments and so on. Things that you can do tangibly. So that's, just in terms of your personal practice and maybe worthy of a discussion about language being used at school. But there are some tangible things. GSAs can have a dramatic impact and improve school environments, not just for LGBTQ people. And there's a lot of resources to help start those. And some of you are in elementary thinking, well, I don't know if that really applies. We've had more and more schools around the province that have set up diversity clubs or rainbow clubs, or they've had their grade 6 or 7 students go and visit with the GSA at the high school. And in a couple of instances, one of my schools shared the same campus, so it made it really easy. I could just walk across the field and take part in that. And that was a great way for leaders at the high school, the students, to take on a leadership role, speak directly to younger students, and just fostering that message of acceptance. And for any of you who have grade 6 and 7 students at your school, as they transition to high school, there's a lot of anxiety that builds. So creating those connections, and if it's somebody who may be questioning their gender identity or sexual orientation, to have that discussion happening in advance of high school may take away a lot of that anxiety. It's not going to completely eliminate it, but it may help out. In some of the smaller districts and even the larger ones, we found that district GSAs have been quite helpful as well. So if you can imagine, if there's one high school in your district or two, outing yourself in a small town can be a bit of a challenge. But if you provide a district GSA, it's maybe an opportunity for it to be more discreet, or for you to expand on the number of students in the group. So we have a number of districts, Greater Victoria and Langley, that have developed district GSAs. Delta's put that as a goal for this year, just to expand the connections that are there. And there's been a lot of growth and shared learning that has happened once they've gone to district GSA. So the GSA can be a very tangible thing that you can do to build that inclusive environment. Some other things that could happen for you, I mentioned the network. A key piece of the network is building capacity. So we've had a training day for all of our district leads from 48 districts back on October 4th. They went back and have started the training, and we will have most of the training done by the end of February for all of our school leads. We have learning modules that are on our website, SOGIeducation.org, that are plug and play, ready to go. And they feature videos that could be played at staff meetings, 5-minute videos, and then extended ones. There's one in curriculum too that I think fits with the discussion we're having today. And I'm going to send that out when we send out the link afterwards. It's a great video. It's about 10 minutes long, but it shows teachers at every grade level actually teaching a lesson. You're provided with snippets and kind of demystifying the whole notion of infusing SOGI education into your curriculum or into the program. Something we did in Delta that was quite tangible is the district provided us with some funds through a resources proposal, and we funded the purchase of SOGI resources at every school site. So I think we had $500 dedicated to each site. And we had a couple of librarians who can often, if you're familiar with the librarians, maybe some here are listening, who are great agents of change for us. And so a couple of librarians went through the list, and there are many out there, Rainbow Lists, the American Library Association. We've got a number of resources that we've turned to, and they're also available online at SOGIeducation.org. So what we did in the libraries is many of them set up displays to introduce the books, and had a diversity display with rainbow flags and so on. Introduce the books. At my school, we left that display for a few months and then just put the books into regular circulation. Inclusive facilities, this is an ongoing issue that we're trying to provide some provincial guidance on. A number of districts that are being challenged with this accessibility, so students who have transitioned, looking to find access, fair access to rooms, change rooms, or bathrooms with the gender they identify with. So that's some supports that we're providing, but I think most districts have worked towards that, but they're doing a lot of workarounds. That's the challenge, is the retrofitting. There's quite a bit of cost, so often it's just changing a first aid washroom or a staff meeting washroom into a gender neutral washroom. What we're moving towards is just having a sign that says washroom and then a picture below it of a toilet, particularly for elementary, so students who can't read or not of age yet to read clearly. So that's a consideration. Then the all gender washroom just makes it, I think the intention is good, but the impact is that it is different than the other washrooms, and we're just trying to create all access for those. Another initiative is to engage parents. Fortunately, in my previous school, we had parents who are active with the DPAC, very supportive of the SOGI policy that had been put in place. We had a conversation at the PAC meeting, and it was very productive and helpful, and reassuring for me as an administrator as well, knowing that we were going to venture into this work. So having the parent engagement is important. A diversity assembly. So, I mean, this whole notion of SOGI 123, it's just one resource to support that concept of inclusivity. I mentioned last week, you think about the Rick Hansen School Program provides, resources to support or foster awareness on those people who are living with disabilities and have accessibility issues. We've also got Choose Your Voice. That's a resource, an anti-racism resource, the Friend-to-Friend program for autism. SOGI 123 is one more. And so a number of schools have incorporated SOGI into a standalone assembly, particularly at high school, but others have just factored it into a diversity assembly or meeting or celebration school-wide. So that's a consideration. Pride Week, this is something we did last year in Delta, and our SOGI coordinator, District Lead Trevana Spilchin, just coordinated this throughout the district, and it was a Pride Week. It was noted Delta District Pride Week, and it tied in with Pink Shirt Day, or sorry, International Day of Pink. And it was left to schools to determine what that would look like at their school. And in some schools, there were just a couple of announcements during the week. Others did assemblies and various things. So having a bit of an initiative there for people to buy into. Something that happened in Delta when I was the district lead a couple of years ago, which is where it kind of started, pardon me, we had, once we trained the school leads, it became this grassroots movement. So we had one school lead at a school in Tawasin who created a bulletin board, and it was SOGI related with rainbow themes and just notions of diversity and so on. They put it right at the front entrance of the school, sent me a picture of it. I sent it to all the school leads, and before 2 weeks were over, we had, I think, about 8 schools that had replicated that and done that at their school. And what a powerful message that is to those students who may be feeling underrepresented at their school in their lives, maybe not reflected in the curriculum. To see that bulletin board be very powerful. Posters and stickers as well. I think of an example a few years ago, a grade 6 teacher came to me and said, Matt, do you mind if I put up this Canada flag? It's a Pride Canada flag. So where the red bars are, it's rainbow, and then the red maple leaf in the middle, and it's huge. And this is a grade 6 teacher who's really into sports, not unlike myself, and he had Seahawks big banner up, and he had the Canucks banner up, and there's the Pride flag up there as well. And I thought, what a powerful message for those students. And there was one student in particular we've been kind of tracking and supporting. And I thought, as soon as he steps into that class, that grade 6 class, that's going to be such a strong message of acceptance for him when he sees that, without any words being spoken, just to see that Pride flag. So some of the posters, there's a lot of resources online. In fact, BCTF, which has been a leader in this work for 20 years or more, they provide a lot of free resources available through their social justice department. And you can find those available online just at their website. They do need to be ordered by a member of the BCTF, but I'm sure you can make that happen. But some of the resources you'll see here, there's also plenty of other posters as well. And now into, pardon me with the coughing. curriculum and resources. So I shared this quote last week. I think it's worth repeating, and particularly for those of you who weren't there. But why SOGI Education? We're trying to reflect all of the lives around us and those perspectives, and then provide for others to see that diversity. And that's what the curriculum is. That's what we're doing with our educational programs. And I would suggest to you quite confidently that the LGBTQ perspective has been underserved within the curriculum for a long time. So another connection is the core competencies. So the key one that it connects with is personal and social. And you can see that one point there, personal and social competency encompasses the abilities students need to thrive as individuals and understand and care about themselves and others. Direct connection there with SOGI 123, along with any other resources that support that notion of inclusivity. So what does that look like in terms of curriculum and age appropriateness? That's an issue that comes up, and those of you, anytime sexual health education comes up during the year, it's often a bit of a panic, maybe within the parent community or even on the staff who lack that confidence. So where does SOGI fit? It's not sexual health education. It's just fostering that awareness. And so you can see on this slide here, just different topics that arise within certain grade levels and how SOGI could be integrated. And when I look at the political aspects and the civil rights aspects, there's a fascinating history there to be discussed. And unfortunately, it's happening more and more. It typically used to be reserved for social justice courses, and even those were controversial when they were brought in. But now there's more and more discussion happening throughout the curriculum and different strands of the curriculum. So I'd like to share a little lesson that I had a chance to observe. It was a demo lesson, just to give you something tangible, what it could look like. This is for a grade 6 group. And the presenter, Sarah Larson, she was a SOGI coordinator and district lead in Burnaby, and just a great asset to that district and to us in the network. So she did a very simple exercise that proved to be very profound for me and we had all of our counselors in Delta observing this demo lesson. She simply put up these two symbols, and she asked the kids, actually first thing she did was ask the kids to brainstorm 3 things: careers, things, and activities. Careers, things, and activities. So they put them all on pieces of paper, little sticky notes, and she then presented this continuum, so the gender, male, female, and she asked them in groups to look at the different things and activities and careers and align them with one or the other gender. And what happened is, I'll take this for an example. This is a brainstorm variety of different things. As we sat back and wondered how this was going to play out, I thought it was quite fascinating to see, at the age of 11, what's been kind of entrenched for them for gender. So this is just a sample list that I created. And the conversation, when they first were asked to start placing them on the board, so it was on a big whiteboard, and after they'd gone through as a group and she introduced this continuum, asked them to come up one group at a time, one representative at a time, to place the stickies where they think. Was it closer to the male, the female? Would it go right in the middle? And they had to choose. And there was, undoubtedly a lot of comments from the audience, and questioning some of the decisions, but the idea is that they were to remain silent, and then there'd be questions at the end. So initially, it tended to be pretty stereotypical. You can see how I've aligned these. I think most of us instinctively might just be drawn, dolls, that would be probably more feminine, and hockey more masculine. But as you take another moment to think about it, I don't know about you, but I played with G.I. Joe when I was younger, nonstop with my brother, and then it was a Bionic Man, and then Star Wars, and how is that any different really than a doll? And so these are the type of conversations start happening with the students, and they started to really poke at some of the stereotypes that were out there. And so you'd start with this initial placement of, people's, take on where they would fit on this gender continuum. And then as you had a discussion, most of those items fit in the middle somewhere rather than on one side or the other. It was a great discussion. It was about 45 minutes to an hour. They went back into their groups, discussed where they'd place them again and why they would critique certain placements and so on. And it really got them to reflect on some of their preconceived notions on gender. That's one example of how it could come up. And within that discussion with gender, we had one student who almost seemed like she'd been planted there, who started talking about transgender people and how they would fit. And so there was a bit of a bird walk that we could take that just came naturally. It wasn't an imposed lesson on transgender individuals, and it was just a natural flow from this, like where do transgender people fit within this discussion? This is an exercise I've done with a few groups, and I only bring it up here because to give you a little sampling of what is available on our website. So SOGI 123, the one page, SOGI 1, is policy, 2 is curriculum, or sorry, inclusive environments, and 3 is curriculum. So on the curriculum page, you're going to find a lot of resources to support work in classrooms and school-wide. So we have BCTF workshops that are listed. They are free, by the way, and great workshops. There's 4 of those with one parent workshop. You just need a member, once again, to request those, and a certain, I think it's a minimum of 10 people have to be there. And then some other resources. We have books that are listed with a synopsis along with grade level. Same with films that are provided with a SOGI theme. And then we're all connected. We have one lesson for almost every, well, for every grade level on our website. It's also connected directly with the curriculum, the core competencies, the big ideas. It's pretty easy. It's all there for teachers. If they're looking to make some connections with the curriculum, that's available online. Some additional resources for you to consider. So SOGI 123, as I mentioned, is a resource. There are many other resources, and quite frankly, we've borrowed from many of the resources and much of the work that's happened before us. Glenn Hansman started doing this work, I think, 20 years ago, maybe, in Vancouver as an anti-homophobia coordinator, and others have followed in his place. So we've borrowed from a lot of the lessons that have been proven to be effective, but there's other groups. Pride Education Network, which is local, featuring teachers from BC. We have GLSEN, which is an American organization of educators, as well as GALE, which is Canadian. Welcoming Schools was a great resource. When I first started to do this work about 4 years ago, worked closely in Delta. Welcoming Schools provides a free resource online, a PDF that provides you with district, school, and classroom-based initiatives that you can take on. Transcare BC, that's the question I've been getting most of this year, is how do I support a child who is transitioning at my school? And so there are resources out there. Transcare BC is a great resource. In fact, that's likely where that student would turn, but there are a lot of resources available online. There are also transition documents that are available. And what that is, and it's a great resource for a school-based team, or if you have a child who's presenting with gender identity or is considering transitioning, there is a checklist within many of these trans policies where you can kind of troubleshoot some of the challenges that could come up. Little questions that you would sit down with the family, ideally the family supportive, and the student, say, okay, so if you're going to be transitioning, here are some things we need to consider. One would be pronouns. The other would be, you know, what facilities you're going to be using. Are your parents supportive? If not, can we use your name on official documents, the name that you transitioned with? So a lot of questions to go through, and Transcare also provides support. Community is a Vancouver-based community group. They also provide some support on the island in Fraser Valley, I believe. So they have Pride Speaks for students, but they also do queer competency courses for staff. So another resource for you. Out in Schools is a group that maybe you're familiar with. They do presentations and turn to film, very powerful films that are SOGI themed, and present those to schools and have frank discussions about being gay or transgender or somewhere on that spectrum. Options for Sexual Health, that's a group that is worked under the Health Authority, and there's still some resources online, but their funding is no longer being provided. So thrown a lot at you in terms of resources. Just some closing notes before we take some questions. Thinking about how you can make your school more welcoming and inclusive. Could start with a poster and a sticker. That could be a real powerful thing for some of your students and staff to see. Then ask yourself, what's your personal commitment? I said this last week, and I've said this in many presentations. As a gay man, I was worried about people thinking I had an agenda. I was a little hesitant about going too far. And I feel a bit of guilt on that, actually, because I had students that were depending on me to do that. So the question is, what are you prepared to do? What commitment can you make to make your school SOGI inclusive? And I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Just a comment and a question. So just noticing during your presentation, and not to single any one person out, but the majority of attendees in the presentation today are women. So I guess my question is, in terms of the leadership that's happening in schools, SOGI leads groups, are men underrepresented from your perspective? And if that is the case, I was wondering if you might share some thoughts about why you think that is.
I think that may be a fair argument to make. However, I mean, the stats suggest that there's far more women teaching and far more female educators, particularly in elementary where I was focused. Just with our district leads, though, I wouldn't see there's not a huge disparity. So we have 51 district leads, so I wouldn't see a huge change in that, or a difference, I should say. I'm not sure what would account for that. That's interesting. I have not seen that within, within the meetings that we've held and so on, and some of the, we did some in-service for BCP at the short course and so on, and there was a good gender balance there. So fortunately, I haven't seen that elsewhere. Hopefully it's a one-off.
Also, thank you, Matt. So there's a lot of good work happening in BC, and you've shared a lot of great resources. I'm curious from your perspective, is there a province or territory out there in the country that we can learn from, that seems to be leading in this area?
Well, I like to think we've caught up to most, but actually Alberta, and you would think with the politics in the last 15, 20 years, you wouldn't think that Alberta would be as progressive on this front. However, they have been, and particularly in legislation and providing protections for students and GSAs and so on. So Alberta has been leading the way in many areas. What we're finding, though, is we're kind of reaching out to other provinces to share resources, just as we're trying to share within BC, is there are lots of evidence of work happening, but in pockets, and so we're trying to piece those elements together and learn from each other's experience. So I would say that Alberta, of all the districts, we have other resources, though, great resources and policies from Halifax and Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan. Manitoba's provided us with some great resources too in terms of research, and the Every Teacher Project, which was just surveying teachers across Canada on their support for SOGI education and looking at some of the barriers. So provide us with some great data on that as well.
All right, good to know. So we have a little bit of work to do in BC, but it seems like we are catching up, so that's encouraging. I'm just paying attention to the time. I'm going to bring our webinar to a close. So I did mention to Matt at the beginning that we got great uptake in terms of our first webinar presentation. I'm sure it will be the same for this. And so, Matt, thank you again for your leadership and for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. I think that this two-part series, I hope, is just the beginning, and you'll come back and join us again to share other learnings and resources.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Kevin. I appreciate it. And to all of you who took a half hour out of your day, thanks for joining us, and good luck. And feel free to contact me if you require further support. Thank you.